Para onde quer que se olhe, aí está. Pensa que a psiquiatria não tem nada a ver consigo? Pense nisso de novo. Todo o campo da psiquiatria introduziu-se em cada faceta da sua vida.
They basically believe that everyone is mentally ill.
You smoke too much, it's a disease. You're too unhappy, it's a disease. You're too thin, it's a disease. You're too fat, it's a disease.
Where are these coming from? These are coming from the minds of psychiatrists that are dreaming these things up, writing papers and getting published with their names on it, creating these new diseases.
First he said that I had ADD. Then he said that I was depressed. Then he said I might be bipolar, but I don't have ADD anymore.
And he said, you know, I've been noticing you, and I wonder if you have it too.
What they decided is that both my husband and my son had a chemical imbalance that needed to be corrected with a chemical balancer.
There is not one shred of credible evidence that any respectable scientist would consider valid, demonstrating that anything that psychiatrists call mental illness are brain diseases or biochemical imbalances. It's all fraud.
There's no reliability of diagnosis, and there is no science. It's just pseudoscience. It's pretend science.
This is one of the most open secrets in all of America in the psychiatric field, that nothing is being done that's legitimate, and they're billing for it.
How do you evaluate if someone is cured or sick?
Cure is certainly something we look forward to. We have no earthly idea how to accomplish.
We're not good at causes. We don't know what causes mental illness.
Mas isso não os impediu de se declararem peritos em saúde mental e tratar as pessoas contra a sua vontade. E os resultados?
This psychiatrist, man who's supposed to work to heal people, has done nothing but destroy this man's life, and in destroying his life, destroying the lives of all of his loved ones. Excuse me.
They've damaged and ruined my son, and they've trapped him in a system.
The way that they treated him and made him feel like he was worthless.
Ryan was being kept dumb and high on Ritalin so that they could make $2,500 per month.
He gave me Valium, and I got addicted to it.
It wiped out my life.
My life has been ruined. My joy has been stolen.
She was laying there. She took two gasps of air and died right there in front of me.
It is really tragic. It's awful. And it's being done for money. That's why it's being done.
Oh, it's got to be in the billions. I don't know the exact number, but it's got to be in the billions. It's just unbelievable.
This is so big that it boggles the mind.
Pegue na tragédia humana que acaba de ver e multiplique-a por milhões. Nas últimas 4 décadas, quase o dobro de americanos morreu em hospitais psiquiátricos do governo do que em todas as guerras dos Estados Unidos desde 1776. As companhias de seguros pagam 69 mil milhões de dólares por ano pelos serviços psiquiátricos, duplicando o custo das cotas de seguros médicos. E enquanto embolsam mais de 2 bilhões de dólares por ano, os psiquiatras não podem mostrar uma única cura. Difícil de acreditar, é exatamente com o que contam. E como lhes iremos mostrar, é como têm escapado desde o início.
The roots of psychiatry have to do with control, power, and alienation from certain groups of people who were uncomfortable to be around. They were locked up in these places to get them out of the way. The history of psychiatry, I think, really is related to institutions.
O Hospital Royal Bethlehem de Londres foi uma das primeiras instituições psiquiátricas do mundo. Conhecido como Bedlam, o hospital não era mais do que um armazém para aqueles considerados loucos. Os internados eram encarcerados em jaulas, despensas e estábulos, eram acorrentados à parede e eram chicoteados, enquanto o hospital cobrava a admissão para a exibição pública. No século XVIII, William Batty foi o primeiro a promover que os seus hospitais podiam curar os doentes mentais. Os manicômios de Batty tornaram-no no homem mais rico da Inglaterra, ainda que os seus tratamentos fossem tão desumanos como os praticados em Bedlam, sem um único paciente curado. O seu êxito financeiro desencadeou uma expansão no negócio dos manicômios e a oportunidade para os psiquiatras lucrarem com esta nova indústria crescente.
This was an era where, on both sides of the Atlantic, specialized institutions for the mentally ill are beginning to be built in large numbers. Those institutions date back certainly to the beginning of the 18th century, and in a few cases even earlier than that. But the explosive growth of an asylum sector, of asylumdom, as some historians have called it, is very much a 19th century phenomenon. It's that period when the state is persuaded to invest tax dollars in building these places.
Mas enquanto aqueles que dirigiam as instituições enriqueciam, faltava aos psiquiatras a credibilidade para maximizar as suas receitas.
In order to justify their profession, they needed to come up with these biological solutions, or they didn't have any profession. The only way for them to solve that was to attempt to start believing that these people that were suffering from emotional disorders was from a biological basis.
Whatever was done to make this person more manageable would be simply called a treatment. And the sad reality is that many of these so-called treatments were, in essence, torture.
The near-drowning devices that were developed in this period, for example, must have been appallingly frightening. For example, one device involved putting the patient into a coffin, closing the lid, and dumping it into a bath of water, and then opening it up and trying to revive the patient. There were a range of these things, and the mortality rate was very, very high.
Os psiquiatras procuraram depois dar crédito às suas práticas ao disfarçá-las na linguagem da medicina. Este redesenho do tratamento tornou-se conhecido como modelo médico.
Somebody who's really hyper and manic, if you're wrapped up in a cold sheet and dunked into some water, you're going to quit acting manic because that's a punishing treatment. So, but as soon as the symptoms started to go away, they started to believe that somehow by wrapping them up and dunking them in cold water, it was draining the toxics out of their body. So they built the medical model around that.
Ao levar mais adiante a teoria biológica da doença mental, um americano, Benjamin Rush, propôs a ideia de que a loucura era causada devido a um grande volume de sangue na cabeça. A cura? Tirar o sangue por qualquer meio. Imobilização, água gelada, sangramento, inclusive o terror. E com isso, criou-se um novo modelo médico.
Benjamin Rush was probably the most famous American physician of the Revolutionary era. Rush was known as the master bleeder. He bled his patients for madness. He also invented something called the tranquilizer. It's a chair that looks a little bit like an electric chair. The patient was confined in this apparatus, sometimes with cold water applied to his or her head, for some hours at a time, and Rush announces in a letter that he's invented this new contraption and dubbed it the tranquilizer.
Os procedimentos frequentemente letais de Rush foram detalhados